For NFT newbies and OGs in Web3 alike, welcome to the Women in Web3 podcast, sponsored by Weld Recruiting. I'm your host, Carly Long, and I'm super excited to help break down the barriers to entry in the space and introduce you to some leaders who are doing truly amazing things. So let's dive in. Lauren, welcome to Women in Web3. We are pumped to have you on today. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I feel like we're very in sync today. You know, we're dressed the same. We've got basically the same headphones on, and we've got very similar podcast names. But yeah, super excited to be part of this.
Absolutely. For those of you who cannot see us because you're listening in, we are both rocking the black tank top today. Like she said, similar headphones. It is a look. I love it. And Lauren I will let you dive deep into this, but she is the founder of Women of Web3. So Lauren, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into Web3, and what you're working on with Women of Web3.
Yeah, of course.
That's a lot of Women of Web3 in there.
Absolutely happy to. So my background is in agencies and tech. I've always kind of jumped between the two. Wasn't quite sure would I sit more on the creative side or the technology side, and so I was very relieved to find Web3 NFTs and all of this whole world open up to me, because I was like, okay, this suddenly makes sense of my experience and skills and interests. So I've been head of marketing for a digital agency, and then I went to Meta to work on things like their International Women's Day events, and there was podcasting, marketing, a little bit of everything, and working on something called She Means Business, their sort of program for female entrepreneurs. And so when I was first exploring Web3, and I was thinking, this looks so interesting, I was so excited, but so jargony, and I feel like I don't belong here. It feels like there's an opportunity to create something for women and sort of connect us up with each other. And so I thought, okay, well, I can actually borrow what I've learned by running things like She Means Business and pull some of that, the format of it and like how to help women in a sort of scaled way, in a digital way, and do that in Web3. So decided to create Women of Web3, and it had a nice little alliteration and all of that, and I was briefly very proud of myself for thinking of it. Although saying that, there's also Unstoppable Women of Web3, which started at basically the same time. But
I think you should still be proud. There are a lot of us, and I think we are all awesome and need to create a sisterhood.
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of brilliant women out there, and loads of brilliant sort of female-led projects and initiatives. So I feel, we're in good company. So so in terms of what I'm working on, well, as me and you were chatting about just beforehand, I feel like there's just so much on always in Web3. There's just a lot of noise, there's lots going on, and there's lots of shiny things to chase. And so it's quite hard to remind myself to be like, okay, we can't do all of those things. Which of those would sort of deliver most value for the Women of Web3 community, and what can I actually execute in that time, and do I have time to look after my own child, and do I have time to sleep? Just remembering to build in all of those things into a day or a week or an hour on a Twitter space. But sorry, to be more specific about what I'm working on, that was a very vague answer. I am working on things like the podcast takes up a lot of my time, the Women of Web3 podcast, because it's every single week. Is that the same for you, by the way?
Yeah, we're weekly. I do not edit it myself, though. Do you edit yourself?
I know I've farmed that out now. I've learned that that's a better way to do it.
That is a huge time saver. But I have realized, like you were saying, I've talked to quite a few moms on here, and even just women and people who are single or doing their own thing. No matter what it is, it's like once you dive in, you go down these what I call rabbit holes of like, you start on one project or one thing, and then you meet someone else and they're doing something else. And especially if you ever hop on Twitter, then you find yourself just an hour later, and you might know a lot more about Web3, but you definitely lost that hour.
Definitely. I definitely found that when, especially with where my baby was still newborn, or in the relatively early days, that say I'd jump on a Twitter space or be finding all these articles and going down these rabbit holes. And so my baby would sort of wake up, cry, need a feed and a change or whatever, and so going through these sort of cycles of him waking and sleeping, and each time I would still be awake and still staring into the abyss of my phone, being like, oh my god, this stuff's so interesting, I just can't even sleep. It's just, I'm really like addicted to it.
Yeah.
So I definitely identify with that.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know I want to jump back to something you said about kind of being like on the creative and tech side. You weren't fully tech because you have a creative background. It's something another girl I interviewed, Katie Richmond, who also works at Meta. I know you used to be there, but she used this marvelous word. She described herself as tech adjacent. And
Hmm.
so I wanted to ask you, have you ever felt, I know I have, especially when first learning about the space, have you ever felt like that imposter syndrome of thinking Web3, that has to be a super technical thing, right? Like, how am I ever, like, coming from a creative artsy background, is this something I can even understand? Am I crazy for trying? Have you felt that? Have women that you've talked to felt that? And how do you address it?
Yeah, I've definitely felt that. I mean, a few years ago, I was also in PR like yourself, and I was doing tech PR, working with tech startups, and it included some blockchain startups. And I was trying to learn about Bitcoin, trying to learn about blockchain. And I was just like, this just seems really dry, and I can't understand it. And it's just like above my head. And it was my job to try and pitch out stories about these startups. And I just really struggled with it, and I felt like it wasn't for me. Whereas now there's been a few things I could sort of latch onto, like NFTs and kind of where the metaverse fits into all of this, and that kind of made more sense to me. Of like, oh, okay, I can see how that fits into my life, and that's what brings it to life for me. Um, and so I now no longer feel like I need to be technical. I do find a lot of it quite off-putting when you're, I don't know, if you're like signing a transaction using a crypto wallet just to say that, for example, I own this NFT, and so give me access to whatever it is. It is still a little bit nerve wracking because I feel like I don't really know what I'm signing, and so I could be signing my life away, getting my crypto wallet drained. But on a general basis, on that technical point, I'm definitely hearing that from the community of like, oh, I think I need to be technical to be in Web3 or working in Web3, and like you definitely don't. I mean, I'm sure it probably does help in terms of like reading smart contracts and knowing what you're signing, things like that. But I don't know, I think even probably a lot of technical people don't take the time to read it. But like it's in the same way as you don't really know what you're signing if it's in normal language, it's not in jargon. Do you know what I mean? Just normal written
Absolutely. There's
language.
so many things nowadays. At any time you like open an app or a new website, it's like the
Yeah.
whole thing you have
It's
to
like
scroll through and is like, do you accept these terms? And I'm like,
absolutely.
I don't know. I just want to buy I don't know, new t-shirt or something.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, but probably the same sort of thing. So we just need to like not let it put us off the whole thing. I do also think that will probably gradually change as like user experience improves in like lots of different Web3 products. That stuff will probably, well, I kind of hope, take more of a sort of like backseat. It won't be as front and center because a bit like I was in like Facebook Meta's offices, and as is the same in lots of offices now, you have like the sort of exposed pipes and wires and things like that on the ceiling. It feels like that when you're sort of transacting in Web3, that it feels like you can still see all the pipes and everything.
Yeah.
And that actually maybe you just need to sort of put some nice plaster, nice wallpaper on it, and like nobody needs to see that necessarily.
That's a great analogy. I love it. I wanted to ask a little bit about your podcast. I want you to plug it because it's awesome, and I know you've had incredible women guests on here. So, are there any like common themes or big things that you've learned from these conversations? Is there any like one in particular that stood out to you? And I will tell people and drop that link in the show notes so they can go listen as well.
Yeah, yeah, I've met some amazing women through that. But actually, to be honest, I've been surprised that everybody's said yes. They're like, I made my list of who would be my kind of ideal, like like dream list of women. Actually, well, it was my kind of like almost like gold standard. So people like Kathy Hackle and Randy Zuckerberg, and Nicola Mendelsohn. Her episode just came out earlier. She's kind of one below Sheryl Sandberg at Meta. Um, so all these amazing women, and they've all said yes to being part of it. And I've sort of already recorded, done and dusted, and I'm like, okay, so I need a kind of above the top of the list. So I'm like, okay, gonna add like Serena Williams, Reese Witherspoon, da da da. Obviously, I haven't approached any of them yet, but like, I probably will. Like, eventually, I'll.
Go for it.
I
Web3
don't
is the
know.
place to dream big.
Yeah, because in a way it is quite a small world, and you can get access to people, and that's been pretty amazing. In terms of learnings, I feel like I've learned loads. I mean, that was part of why I started the podcast, was like I wanted to get under the skin of all this stuff. So I feel like each week I'm learning, yeah, something new from the women that I interview. Um, Probably the person I found really interesting to interview was Lindsay McInerney. So she previously was at AB InBev, which is a massive drinks company, and so she ran things like a Stella Artois NFT activation. This was last year when like this was very unusual to do something like that. So she
Yeah.
really had to be sort of pioneering that internally and then externally. And now she's gone and started, like, as a result of the success of that, started a business with Mila Kunis, the like Hollywood actress. No big deal. And they run a blockchain entertainment company. And I don't know. So she, in a way, comes from a similar world to me in terms of coming from sort of marketing and corporates, but then she's gone off and done all these amazing things. I don't know. I basically just look up to her a lot, and just a like fangirl is the short version of saying I'm a fangirl. And she had lots of interesting things to say. So I was intrigued by how you could use blockchain and NFTs in the entertainment space, because that's not my field at all. And so super interesting to see how it'll affect each industry like this.
I love that. And I feel like I fangirl over everyone in Web3. All of these women that I'm talking to, no matter what they're doing, they all wind up having like such an amazing story,
Mm.
ideas. I know you mentioned like a little bit about community, and I know you've been building communities from I don't know how many years now, but I know you did it with like Power Suit Social in 2017, the She Means Business program you mentioned. So what are there big differences or similarities that you see between Web2 communities and Web3
Ooh.
communities?
Oh, that's a quite good. Sorry, that's a very good question. Quite a good question. Very good question. And also you've done your own research there. So the fact that
I
you know about my previous
have.
thing, Power Suit Social, that was more of a side hustle. And actually, I thought that Women of Web3 would also be a side hustle, and now it's just like my hustle. This is my job. Like
I
now
love
I
it.
work in Web3.
That's how
Uh,
the best things come about.
yeah. So I feel like with Power Suit Social, that was also a kind of future facing community of thinking like, okay, how are things like um, new technologies and reduced budgets going to affect the creative industries and like our careers in it, and what work we can create. So I did like a sort of series of talks of things like, what will the agency of 2025 look like? Actually, that sounds this, I was doing that talk in like 2018, so that felt like a very long time away. It doesn't feel that long away now, but I really enjoyed that, and I think people enjoyed being able to like latch on to the what's in it for me factor of like learning about how to sort of hack their own career. So that's what I did with the Power Suit podcast, was like interviewing different creative leaders, like loads of generally women. It wasn't only aimed at women, it wasn't only interviewing women, but like that's who I decided to spotlight more. And I just learned so much from these amazing creative leaders each time I interviewed anybody. And I can't actually remember where I'm going with this. You asked about sort of similarities. Um,
Yeah,
oh
just
yeah,
what you've seen in Web2 versus
yeah.
Web3
Um,
communities.
so I think I was probably a little bit naive with things like that they would kind of grow on their own,
Yeah.
or that. So I was pedaling really hard to kind of grow this community and try and connect them up with each other, and that was mostly in the form of events. I now kind of wish we had things like Discord, or like a way of more directly connecting people, or like it's now also quite normal to have WhatsApp groups with people. And I
Mhm.
think actually if I'd had some of those technologies, well, so they existed but it wasn't like the norm then, I think that would have been a really good way of connecting people with each other. And I think that was probably a missing piece back then. And now with Women of Web3, it's actually deliberately not connecting people up, because because it's scaling so quickly, because there's so much interest in Web3 and everyone gets like excited and obsessed with it,
Yeah.
that I don't it could get untenable really quickly. And also I think I don't really want to add to the noise in people's phones of like more notifications to deal with. Is like try and give them instead sort of short and sharp like learnings, opportunities, short things. So like, yeah, come and participate in an event if you're in London, or listen to the podcast. It's sort of maximum about half an hour, and yeah, just keeping things sort of short and actionable in that way. That was probably one of the learnings I took across from previous hustles.
That's awesome. I want to ask, and this is kind of putting you on the spot because it's a big question, but
Uh-oh.
I know, well, it's a Women of Web3. I know your like kind of vision there. It's a lot of what we've been talking about. It's connecting women in the next iteration of the internet. From all you've learned and digested and talked to people, what would you explain that next iteration of the internet as to someone?
Carly, you can't just ask me a massive question like that. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe we can work through it together. Because like some of the questions that I have and that I get are like, well, what does Web3 mean? Does it encompass NFTs, DAOs, metaverse, blockchain, crypto? How do all of these things tie together? And the way I view it is that is Web3 is the next iteration of the internet and it encompasses all these things. But I don't
Mm,
know if that's really right or wrong. And so I'm curious. I'm like, is that also your take? And I just kind of see it as, you know, the current iteration we're in is it was applying your credit card to websites so that you could purchase things and get things in real life. And so, like, kind of comparing it to that and just explaining now, well, there's public transactions that you can make either with like US dollars, or I don't know if you can make it with pounds, um, or crypto. And that is then recorded, and you can get both a digital collectible, which is an NFT, as well as an in real life physical item. And it can also be taken into this virtual world, which is the metaverse.
yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I sometimes try and limit what detail I share depending on somebody's knowledge level, because like the more beginner they are, um, it's possible to just completely flummox them. Like the more detail we give about, you know, being able to take an NFT that's, you know, say like an outfit on your avatar, and that would be interoperable and be usable in from one virtual space to another, I think kind of blows people's minds. So I would agree with the idea that Web3 is that kind of catch-all term for all of those sort of technologies, even including the metaverse. Like most of the tech we've mentioned is decentralized and sort of like lives on the blockchain, uh, but the metaverse doesn't necessarily. Quite often, it would be sort of centralized companies and things like that. Um, Saying all that, I think these technologies are going to be the sort of dominant technologies in over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, but I don't think they'll replace what exists at the moment. In the same way as when social media came along, that's dominant as well. Like that's everywhere. Like every single company has social media handles, and if they don't, it's very unusual, and you'd be wondering why. But social media hasn't, say, replaced websites. So like each, whether it's company or individual, there's this kind of suite of different digital spaces that we end up with. So like a website serves a certain purpose, social media serves a certain purpose, and then things like NFTs will, yeah, they're creating use cases at the moment, and I'm intrigued to see where those go, because at the moment there's been a lot of, yeah, just kind of flipping JPEGs for lots of money, and I think as more and more of the masses join that, they'll be like, wait, so what's the like end game? Like how far up can number go up work for? Like, yeah, how long will this work?
See, you nailed it. That was that was great. That I mean, that answers like just some of the, like I said, questions that I have, and even I like just being transparent with people, being in the space during this podcast. Sometimes I still get caught up in like, is that what that means? Am I understanding everything correctly?
Yeah.
Um, but I know you said you're excited to just hear more about NFT use cases. Is there anything else that you are most excited for coming down the pipe? Whether that's something within Web3 or something that you're working on and want to shout out?
Ooh. What am I most excited about? I'm excited about digital fashion because at the moment it feels like there's this sort of emperor's new clothes of like, wait, so paying for clothes that you can't wear or touch or store in your wardrobe, closet, an American way. So I kind of want it to get to like the next stage of it becoming a bit more normal to have digital fashion, because I think people would really enjoy playing with that creatively. Like I love using clothes to express myself. Having said that, I haven't done that nearly as much since the pandemic, and I feel like I want to sort of find more joy in my clothing again. But I
Yeah.
think digital fashion can really do that, because you can be like super expressive with like clothes that don't really exist on a body that doesn't really exist, and you could just like have fun with it, of like, how do I look today in the metaverse kind of thing. And as I say, if more people take that up, I think we can have a lot of fun with it.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it goes back, a lot of it, I feel like, is just goes back to like childhood, like imagination of what we can do and what brings us joy. And gosh, I loved my dolls. I loved dressing them up. I, not too long ago, when my parents moved, I found my old chest and I had like made clothes for them. And
Wow.
it would be so cool to be able to do that for your avatar and your digital self that is represented on social platforms, or um, whether in the metaverse or not. So I love that. Want to open it up. I know we're getting close to time here. Is there anything else that you want to add, or anything that you want to close out with?
Sure, I've realised I don't know if I actually explained what Women of Web3 is, other than saying it's a community, which is my
Oh my
fault,
gosh.
because I know you've given me plenty of opportunities to explain, and I've just ignored you completely. But also, other than it
Well, I know
being,
we had our chat beforehand, so that is also on me too, because I feel like we just dove right into some of the deeper conversations here.
oh, I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. But so to actually explain what Women of Web3 is, so like I've talked about why it needed to exist and the fact that it's this community, but what that at the moment looks like is connecting women with jobs, resources, and each other. So we'll talk about it as jobs, resources, and connections. So there's a jobs board of sort of vacancies in like Web3 startups, DAOs, etc., and a talent collective that women can apply to be part of. But then, learning resources wise, there's this weekly podcast, and I did have all these like grand plans for like, I'm going to do like a video course in this, and this. I need to not get distracted by shiny things, just like do a few things really well, so that people know what to expect from the community and what they can learn, what they can access. And then the connections piece, for now it's events in London. So there hasn't been very many so far, but there's just like this amazing energy in the room, because people are so curious and excited about this space. So it's so amazing being in a room of everybody that's kind of all aligned in values and excited for the same stuff. And so it is quite sort of like electric energy in the room. So that's the end of me plugging my own thing. But no, I get a lot of joy from it.
No, I love that you plugged it. And that leads me into, for people who want to form that connection with you and Women of Web3, where should they go? You can spell it out, and I will drop the links in the show notes as well.
Awesome. It's the website is probably the best place to go, because that sort of houses everything without needing to live on a link tree, because I think that those aesthetically, I don't like them. So go to the website, womenofweb3.co. And through there you can sort of go and access like the podcast, find our social channels, which are all at Women of Web3 Co. And if you want to connect with me directly, LinkedIn is the best place for that. I'm finding myself increasingly obsessed or addicted to LinkedIn at the moment. It's there's a
I
lot
am
going on,
too.
and it's
I constantly have it up in the background.
yeah, I know it's very distracting, but like enjoyably distracting. So yeah, website for anything to do with Women of Web3, and then LinkedIn is best if you want to actually chat to me, Lauren.
Awesome. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure we will be doing episodes and more to come.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening today. If you enjoyed today's guest and podcast, be sure to rate, subscribe, comment, all the things. And definitely get in touch. I love to connect with y'all. I love to hear what you're working on, any feedback or comments. If you want to meet a guest, if you want to be a guest, just reach out. You can find me, your host, Carly Long, at by Carly Long on all social media platforms. You can subscribe to my weekly newsletter, which is also Women in Web3, and you can follow along at Weld Recruiting. Be sure to let us know however we can support you, and we look forward to our next episode.